Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
It is a beautiful Sunday morning here. At least it is where I'm at. I don't know about Courtney's weather,
Mhm.
but it's like 70 right now, which is glorious after these like 100-degree days. So hopefully you guys are having some decent weather wherever you are this morning or afternoon, middle of the night, whenever you're listening to this.
Yeah, we're having this weekend some weather in the 80s, but do not fret. Coming up this week, there will be temperatures in over the hundreds. So I will be sweating again while I'm not currently sweating now. I don't know. I always get sweaty when we're recording because my house has, they're not window units, but they're like the new fancy air conditioning that you see like in Airbnbs where each room can be set to its own thing. So obviously when I record, I can't turn it on and it gets real hot in here by like towards the end. And then I start talking over myself and I get real sweaty real quick.
It's like a flashback to when I lived in our old house where we had only window units and only two of the rooms. And then the room that we recorded in had no window unit at all and was very hot and sticky. And
Yeah, when we did our Patreon bonus that's coming out in 2 days, shout out. I got very sweaty during that one because we recorded it at night. And so the sun was barreling in and it was not fun, but that episode is fun. So be sure and check that out.
you're going to need to like turn on the AC in that room like super low for like an hour beforehand and then turn it off so it like ride that cool for a little bit longer.
Yeah, get some of that. But yeah, now that we've talked about air conditioning, I hope your air conditioning is not going out in this heat wave.
Yeah.
And we don't really have too many updates, but we do have a correction because that's just our lives. So we got it was a YouTube comment and an email because sometimes we neglect to look at our YouTube comments because they're a little mean sometimes. So sometimes if you comment there, we might not always see it. And I do apologize.
Sorry about that.
I did now respond 3 weeks later. So Kaya, I hope that is correct. That is how Google said to pronounce this name. So if it's wrong, I guess you guys are going to hear a correction in the next like episode or two of that.
We're correcting our correction. That's just how we live over here.
So when we did the Manson family, we were talking about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders and how DNA had revealed who had done it. And I think we'd mentioned like, I don't know, arrests, trials, whatever. That man actually died in 1979 at the age of 35 in prison, I think from a heart attack. So he will not be going to trial anytime soon, which I actually think I saw when I was looking it up. He may have like been acquitted of those already. So I don't even actually know.
I'm pretty sure
if he was alive,
yeah.
how that would have worked. Because I think double jeopardy only applies unless you have new evidence. And then you can do, I'm not sure.
Does it though?
Don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
We'll have another correction on a correction on a correction.
Because I thought like with double jeopardy, it was like you can't try them like with the same evidence. But if it's like a new, like huge amount of evidence comes forward, you could maybe, but I also don't know. And it also doesn't matter because he's dead. He died a long time ago.
I thought, and this is not in any way saying that this is how it is, but in my brain, I thought that double jeopardy was like the same charges. So like you could be acquitted of like first degree murder, but then you could go back to trial for like second degree murder. But that may not be true either. You know what,
Courtney? I think there's probably a lot of loopholes. Are we going to do a whole Patreon episode on double jeopardy?
100%. That is what,
and then we're going to watch the movie
month.
And we're going to give a review of it because that's a great movie.
Perfect. We got the next 2 months lined up. We are ready to go. Okay. Yep. Look at us doing planning live. I love it.
Live action. Here we go.
So if y'all want to learn about double jeopardy and instead of just Googling it yourselves, you could, join Patreon so you can hear us bullshit about it and talk about all the things that we got wrong or that we did not know about double jeopardy. But yeah, we apologize for that just completely wrong information that we just pulled out of our ass, apparently, because this guy has been dead for a very long time. So he's not going to any kind of earthly trial, at least. I don't know about the other places, what they do there.
God comes opening his door. Bro, you evicted. You gotta go.
Nope, your time here is done.
Well, I think from what I read too, I mean, he was in jail for something else. I don't think he was a great guy. So
he's probably already there.
He's got to go down to one more layer of hell. Hold on. We just gotta bump you down a little bit more.
Put you on this elevator.
Yes,
Oh,
Jean
boy.
Leroy Hart is now coming into floor 4 for murder instead of just whatever. Bring out the scissors.
Oh, wow. This episode just took a lot of turns.
A lot of turns.
Well, that's all we have to start with. So we are going to go ahead and get into today's case, which I can't remember. It's been on our list for a while. I can't remember where I heard it. I don't know if I heard it on another podcast or if it like came up somewhere else. I don't know, but I've never heard like details of it. I've never heard like a lengthy podcast on it. And when I was doing research, there was very limited information out there. Basically, there were like 2 books that have been written on the subject. One of them apparently didn't go very detailed into the crimes themselves. So I chose to read the other one, and there were only a few online sources. So we hope everything is accurate and correct, but if it's not, that's the only information that we can find out there. In the beginning of the book that I read, he did go into detail about all of the sources that he used, including interviews and court transcripts, police reports, those sorts of things. So we do hope it's accurate. And that book was called Zebra, The True Account of the 179 Days of Terror in San Francisco by Clark Howard. And I'm sorry, Mr. Howard, but I don't recommend the book. It was very good for information, but it was written in the 70s. If you've read true crime books that were written in the 70s, you know what I'm getting at. Very disrespectful to the victims, very racist, just a lot of problematic information. Good for the content, but I do want to put that disclaimer that we are not recommending it as a leisurely reading book. Also got some information from a couple of CBS News articles, an SFIST article, and the Criminal Minds fandom website, which seems like they got most of their information from the book, but they did tie in a few other things. So again, hopefully those things were accurate. I did match up things as well as I could that seemed like everything's pretty, together. So we'll see. From 1973 to 1974, at least 15 white citizens were murdered in the streets of San Francisco. For 179 days, the city lived in fear of random attacks before the murderers were discovered to be part of a sect of the Nation of Islam who were attempting to kill all white people so that the Black race would be dominant. So the Black Muslims, or Nation of Islam, are an independent socio-religious movement in the United States. The movement was founded by Wali Farad, who was an Orthodox Muslim believed to be born in Mecca around 1877. He migrated to the United States in 1931 and established his first mosque in Detroit. And most of his followers were Black Southerners, and he preached that he was the incarnation of Allah, and that if they believed in him, one day their race would overcome the white slave masters, and they would be the supreme race. So their headquarters were moved to Temple No. 2 in Chicago, which became the new Mecca of the nation in January of 1955. And they continued to spread with mosques opening in cities with large Black populations. They also owned Black-operated businesses in these major U.S. cities as well. So the Nation of Islam leaders preached that white, blue-eyed people were the devil. They claimed that an evil Black leader named Yaqub created the white race near the holy city of Mecca 1,000 years ago. So he said that in every Black man, there were 2 germs, Black germs and brown germs. And he found a way to separate them and put brown germs into healthy Black women to produce more brown children. So the darker children who came out were fed to wild beasts, but the lighter children were raised to adulthood and then forced to marry other lighter people until the race became lighter and lighter and the evil white man was born. And I'm now thinking we should have done this as a video episode because Courtney's facial expressions right now are just too good.
It's just like, what?
It's like, I'm telling you, and trying to read the whole chapter of this book that talks about this and then trying to explain it in a way that makes sense. It's just like my head was spinning. So this group said that the white devils spread over the earth and preached about their mysterious God that could not be seen until after death. So the Christian God. So the leaders of this group talked about how white men had manipulated and used Black people for centuries and tried to erase Allah with their new God. So they turned the majority of the world away from Allah. So they're blaming the white race for this. So the group preached that Muslims should murder the white devil because they're a snake, is a terminology that they use often.
So
And they
all
said,
white men are snakes?
yes.
What about white women?
Yes.
Okay. We snakes.
We'll get into that. So each Muslim should murder what they call devils, and they had to murder so many. So we'll get into that in the next in my next paragraph. But after they murdered these people and they would like show proof of them, they would receive a button to wear on the lapel of their coat, which would make them part of the Death Angels group. And then they would then receive free transportation to the holy city of Mecca to see Brother Muhammad.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's just like, this is like, you see this with like every just kind of like radical group. Yeah. Where when you're like on the outside, like listening to what these people are preaching, you're like,
I'm sorry, what? You did what now? Like, and they do talk about when we get into some of these men, how, you know, with any kind of like cult indoctrination, like it starts out like small and it's like, oh, like we need to rebel against the white men, which you can kind of see how they would get there based on the centuries of mistreatment of Black people. And it's like, you know, it kind of starts out with that, like, just very general, you know, we need to fight back against those who have oppressed us, and then turns into all white people are snakes and we should murder them all. Very big jump. Yeah. But if you slowly, you know, I do also want to
see that a lot in cults, like
yes,
Charles Manson, where it was like, we should all love each other. By the way, can you go murder everybody?
Exactly. But it's like, you just slowly get there to by the time you're so immersed in it, it's not completely bizarre. Yeah. We do want to note here that this specific group, so the Black Muslims / Nation of Islam, they are considered a Black nationalist group. They are not considered Muslim within mainstream Islam because of these views. So their views do not represent the views of other Muslims worldwide. So this is a very, very specific group of Black nationalist terrorists, does not represent all Muslims, does not represent all Black people. Want to make that very clear.
With ISIS. ISIS is a radical group, does not represent all Muslims or the Nation of Islam. They are just a radical portion of it. So just remember that whenever you're thinking like, that's what it is. It's like, no. Like these are the extremes, and you're just hearing about the extremes because it makes good news. And
exactly,
ISIS was putting bombs places, but still, like, you're going to hear that.
So Anthony Harris had a 3rd grade education and a history of criminal behavior, including battery on a police officer and burglary. So he came from a large, poor family and was committed to a mental institution at the age of 14. And he was also trained in martial arts. So in 1973, he was in prison for the burglary charge when he met Jesse Lee Cooks. So Cooks sought out Harris because he learned that he was skilled in martial arts, and he asked Harris to teach him jujitsu because he wanted to learn how to kill. So Cooks then told Harris that he was part of a group in San Francisco called the Death Angels. So he said they were a special group of Muslims and that you had to prove that you could kill before you could get in. So as we've already gone into, he went on to explain that you specifically had to kill white people because they had treated the Black race so poorly, and that to get into the Death Angels, you had to kill either 9 white men, 5 white women, or 4 white children. So they believed that it was harder to kill the women and children, so you didn't have to kill as many of those to be seen as worthy of entering this group. So after Harris started training Cooks to fight, he did become a member of the prison mosque and was invited to attend lectures, which arrived at the prison on cassette. So the lectures preached again about the superiority of the Black race and encouraged revenge against the white devils. So while the prison guards were uncomfortable with these tapes being played for prisoners, they were religious materials, so therefore they couldn't restrict them. They had to allow them in under religious freedom. So while in prison, Harris had asked to attend school since he only had a 3rd grade education, but they said that the education program had to have diversity among the students, and they currently had no spots available for another Black man, and he had to wait. So you can see how this would kind of push him more in the direction of this group, because he's like, oh, I'm being punished for being Black again and again.
Yeah.
He also asked to learn to be a baker, but he was told he wasn't smart enough for that. So he now became more involved with the Black Muslims because he finally had a group that he belonged to and that valued him because of his martial arts skills. So he's like, someone sees something in me and I actually have a place now. I've bounced around my whole life. I've been in and out of prison, but I finally have a group that is seeking me out because of these skills that I have, and they want me to join their group. Mm-hmm. So at this time, Harris was married to a white woman, but he began to resent her after listening to the preachings of this group. And upon being released from prison, Harris left his white wife and married a Black woman named Carolyn, even though he was still technically married to his first wife. However, this marriage didn't last either, and he and Carolyn separated after only 3 weeks, and he moved into a halfway house.
Imagine like standing by your husband while he goes to jail, and then he comes out and he was like, nope. Yeah. No more.
He's like, actually, I learned that white people are the devil, so I'm going to have to leave you now. Sorry. So Jesse Lee Cooks was released from prison around the same time as Anthony Harris. Cooks also had a long history of criminal behavior. In 1958, at 12 years old, he tried to smother his mother while she was sleeping. So off to a great start here. He was sentenced to 2 years at the Illinois State Training School for Delinquent Boys, but he was only out for 8 months before he returned on shoplifting charges. So he moved around a lot and was arrested frequently. And in 1963, at 18 years old, he met 16-year-old Rosetta. So they quickly married and had 4 children in 5 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of kids in not a lot of years. So they then moved their family to Los Angeles because they were looking for something better. Cooks was working odd jobs and continued to get arrested for various petty crimes. And on September 11th, 1965, he had been working as a parking lot attendant, but that didn't make enough money to care for his now large family. So he took a note into a supermarket and told them that he had a gun and was robbing them. So he got $1,000 and was able to get away. So he decided to try this again a week later because it had been so easy. But this time the cashier read it and then started screaming for the manager on the intercom, and several store employees tackled him until police arrived. So this time was not quite so easy for him. And also grocery store employees do not get paid enough to tackle people who are robbing the store. Like, I'm just going to give you the money and you can go on about your business. So Cooks was charged with second-degree robbery this time, and he was let out on bail, but he didn't have enough money to take care of his family once again after he redeemed his bail bond. So he did decide to rob a bank. So he's just not learning his lesson here. He did rob 2 banks on the same day and was caught at the second one, and he was convicted for the robberies and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. So when Cooks was released from prison, he found out that his wife had had 2 children with other men while he was away. So now he left California and moved back in with his parents in Omaha and started working for a construction company. He then moved out of state with a new girlfriend without notifying his parole officer and was sent back to prison in California. So he was supposed to be in prison for about 6 months this time, and this is where he joined the prison mosque of the Nation of Islam and learned jiu-jitsu and kung fu from Anthony Harris. So when Harris was released from prison to the halfway house, a man named Larry Green came to welcome him to the local mosque and asked if he would teach self-defense to their teen members. So Harris said that he had to get an approved job, but Green told him that the Nation of Islam owned several businesses and they were approved for ex-cons because they were part of religious organizations. So he's like, look, I can get you a job that is approved, on your list of like what you have to do for your parole. So like, it's all good. Like you can come work with us. So Harris started working at Black Self-Help Moving and Storage Company, where Green also worked. So Larry grew up in Berkeley and was a high school basketball star. He had no criminal history, but he did believe in the message of the Black Muslims. And although he had not been arrested before, he had stabbed a man in the back during sex before joining the Nation of Islam. So he was not completely corrupted by this group. He did have some things going on beforehand. So Harris met back up with Cooks, who was also part of the local mosque. And Cooks worked for Shabazz Bakery, which was another one of the companies owned by the Nation of Islam. So J.C. Simon was born in Opelousas, Louisiana, but moved to Beaumont, Texas as a young boy. He had 3 older siblings and would go on to have 4 younger siblings as well. His father left his family when he was a child, so he had a close relationship with his mom. He worked as a busboy at Beaumont Country Club as a teenager, and he went to Texas College in Tyler, Texas, and dropped out several times, but his mom always made him go back. It was really funny in the book because it's like, he would like come home and she's like, what are you doing? No, go back to school. And she would like drive him back up there. So it's like, he kept like trying to drop out and she's like, I don't think so. Let's go back.
Yeah, you're getting an education.
Yeah. So Simon met Patricia after 3 years in college, and they left school together and moved to Houston, where he worked for a grocery supply warehouse. And in 1970, they had a daughter named Jaclyn Christine, who went by Chrissy. So basically, they just lived this ordinary life until Simon met members of the Nation of Islam. So he became involved with them and really aligned with their worldviews, which separated him from Patricia because she's like, I don't really agree with this group. I'm not really on board with what they think. So at this time, the Nation of Islam members said they were going to take over some businesses in San Francisco. So Simon moved there with 4 other members, leaving his wife and daughter behind. So Manuel Leonard Moore had a speech impediment and was often made fun of by the white girls in school. And they would say things like he looked and talked like a monkey, which is horrible and very racist and not okay.
Yeah.
Manuel was one of 10 children, and he was frequently expelled for fights, which led to his father beating him. He never learned to read, and he started shoplifting at age 13. And this first arrest led to an extensive criminal record of drugs, theft, drunk driving, just all kinds of crimes like this. And in 1969, he was sentenced to 6 months to 15 years in prison for second-degree burglary, which is a very big gap. I don't know how you come up with that kind of sentence.
This happens a lot, like 60s, 70s, 80s. They'll be like 5 years to life. Like there was one that we did recently. It was like 5 years to life. I'm like, that's a big difference. Like, which one is it?
Exactly. But he was paroled after 2 years, so somewhere on the lower end of that. But he did immediately go back to prison for a parole violation. So Moore met Cooks and Harris while in prison and joined the prison mosque as well. And then he also started working at Black Self-Help when he was released from prison. So mosque meetings were held at Black Self-Help with higher up members of the Nation of Islam preaching about Black superiority and the need to remove the white race. So members of the Death Angels were also present, and they displayed photos of white people that they had killed in order to gain their angel wings, which is, remember the thing they get on their lapel that says, like, I've killed either 4 children, 5 women, or 9 men.
So basically, they're just like letting the police know I did it.
Right? Like, okay. So Harris, Cooks, Moore, Green, and Simon attended these meetings along with many others, and they all decided that they too wanted to be a part of the Death Angels and that they would need to get started killing white people so they could earn their wings and achieve recognition from the Black Muslims.
So on October 19th or 20th, sources kind of differ on this one of those days in 1973, Cooks, Green, and Harris were driving down the street looking for white children to kill when they saw 11-year-old Michelle Carrasco. Her brother Greg was having a birthday party inside their house, and she'd stepped outside to see her friend, 12-year-old Marie Stewart, who had walked over with her 15-year-old brother Frank. So Cooks asked her for directions, and when Michelle answered, he pointed a gun at her and grabbed her by the arm. Harris blocked Marie and Frank from running and led them down the street behind Cooks and Michelle. So Green was waiting for them at their van, and Frank distracted the men by yelling cops, and he and Marie ran away. So the men started to run after them, and Michelle used this opportunity to run in the opposite direction. So she's like, okay, you're going after them. I'm going to go this other way. Mm-hmm. We're going to get away. So this obviously frustrated the men because the children had gotten away, but this did not deter them from searching for more people to kill. They were like, just a bump in the road. Let's just keep going. So the men continued to drive when they saw 2 white people walking down the street, 30-year-old Richard Hogg and his 28-year-old wife, Kita. So they were out for an evening walk in the neighborhood, and Green, Cooks, and Harris stopped them on the street with guns. Kita did try to run away, but they threatened to kill Richard if she did. So she stopped, and they pushed both of them into the van and tied them up. A cop car drove by after the Hoggs were inside, and they asked what was going on because they were kind of suspicious about a van on the side of the street with 3 men standing outside of it. I'm sure there was probably also some racism about why the police stopped.
I'm sure.
So the men said they'd just been changing a tire, and the police did believe them and left. So Cooks hit Richard with a lug wrench in the face repeatedly and broke his jaw. Kita was sexually assaulted by Cooks and Harris, and then Green pulled over and pushed her out of the van and killed her by nearly decapitating her with a machete. So like violent killings. This isn't so just brutal. Like execution style, shoot you in the back of the head. This is like very, very brutal. Cooks also attacked Richard with the machete inside the van, and Green then took Polaroid photos of Kita's body. He also stole Kita's ring and gave it to Harris because he was getting married soon. So Cooks stole Richard's wallet before the group left, and the Death Angels said they weren't supposed to rape or steal, only kill the white people. But they're obviously not really caring about these rules, which I feel like is a very like weird rule. I think we see this, like, I think we saw it with BTK where he was like, oh, no. Like, I don't rape people. I just kill them. I just strangle them. So it's like, why these weird rules?
Like, why do you have this like morality clause tied to it where you're like, oh no, I'm not going to rape or rob you. I'm just going to murder you. Like,
yeah. That's always what's so interesting to me is like those weird lines they create.
Yeah. Which is like, it seems like according to the Death Angels, it's like they just care about like this body count. Like, and as we get into like more murders, like they weren't all as like violent. And, you know, like there were a lot that were just like execution style. And they're just like, oh, just like murder, murder, murder. Like, we don't care about this other stuff. It's a very weird mindset. I don't know.
Yeah. So just after 11 p.m., John and Beverly Battenberg were out for a drive when a man stepped off the side of the road in front of their car. So his face and head had been nearly destroyed by a machete, but he was alive. So the Battenbergs didn't know where the closest hospital was, so they drove him to the police station. And the police called an ambulance and they went back to where Richard was found, and they found the evidence of Richard being tied up, and then they found the body of his wife, Keita. So after driving away, Harris, Green, and Cooks went to Harris's fiancée, Carolyn Patton's house, to clean up themselves and their van. And Harris then gave his fiancée the ring they had stolen from Keita, but she didn't notice that it was actually engraved on the inside. So Keita was a reporter for the Industrial City Press in South San Francisco, and she was described as vivacious and outgoing. And Richard was a mining engineer at Utah International Company, and they'd actually previously lived in Southwest Africa for 4 months while Richard worked as a geologist, and they had been married for 7 years. On October 23rd, Cooks watched 27-year-old Linda Lou Inger get off a bus at about 8:30 p.m. So he followed her and held a gun to her neck as she attempted to enter her apartment building. So he guided her away from the building and into a dimly lit parking lot where he tossed her purse and briefcase into the bushes. He talked to her about the oppression of Black people and said it has to stop. And in order for that to happen, some people may be killed and she may be one of them. He did rape her outside in an isolated area and then held the gun on her to lead her back to her purse and briefcase, then force her inside her apartment. He later said he wanted to kill her, but he knew the police would be able to determine that he'd raped her and he would get kicked out of the Death Angels because they weren't supposed to rape their murder victims. So Cooks raped her a second time inside her own apartment, and then he wrote down her phone number and said he would call her later for a date. Like, I cannot imagine being Linda and being like,
right,
you're gonna call me for a date? No.
And he did. Like, I didn't get into it in the notes, but like he did call her like a week later, and she was just like, are you kidding me? Like, no, I'm not gonna go on a date with you. Like, what?
Also, like, with this, you know, kind of cult mentality about the Death Angels and killing, and you're not supposed to rape, and he's just like going on like while you're being raped twice, and he's just spewing all this like bullshit, and you're just like, what the fuck is happening right now?
And he's like, you're a white devil, but do you want to go on a date with me? What? Like,
I don't think that's part of the preachings here. He also told her he would kill her if she called the police, but as soon as he left her apartment, she immediately called the police. On October 29th, Cooks was driving around the University of California Extension campus looking for a white person to murder, and he saw 28-year-old Frances Rose driving her Mustang. He stopped her and told her to give him a ride, so she kind of hesitated, but he did realize that the door was unlocked, and he just forced his way inside, and he quickly shot her 4 times. A witness saw the murder happen from her apartment window, and when police arrived, she described the murderer as a Black man around 25 years old, 5'9" to 5'10", and muscular. So police began patrolling the area and saw a man that fit the description. He was sweating profusely when they stopped him. So they ordered him to put his hands on his head and arrested him. So they found the gun on his body when they searched him. So Jesse Lee Cooks was charged with the first-degree murder of Frances Rose. And a detective that had been assigned to Linda's rape case noticed that Cooks had matched the description Linda had given the police of her rapist. So he contacted Linda, and she identified Cooks out of a lineup as the man that had raped her. So the DA offered a plea deal in which the charges against him for the rape of Linda would be dropped if he would plead guilty to the murder of Frances Rose. So when the DA asked Linda if she would agree to this, she was hesitant because you're not going to see the man who raped you like go to trial and get sentenced for your rape. But the DA told her he would already serve life in prison for Frances's murder. So it wouldn't really matter if the additional charges were added on because you're going to get a heftier sentence for murder than you would for rape.
Mm-hmm.
So Cooks accepted the plea deal, and therefore the Nation of Islam refused to provide him with a legal defense. He was no longer considered part of the Black Muslims and wouldn't receive any protections from them.
Yeah, because like in their group, if you like pleaded not guilty and like as long as you didn't admit to what you had done, like they would provide a legal defense for you and they would like back you up in prison and like protect you and things like that. But like if you admitted to it, they're like, nope, we will not have anything to do with you again.
Yeah, which I feel like would be kind of difficult if you were like so indoctrinated and then you're just like, okay, I'll take this plea deal. And they're like, bye.
Bye. Yeah.
And you're like, I did all this for you. Although he's kind of breaking the rules a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. He's kind of doing his own thing too.
He was probably on his last leg anyway. So on November 9th, 35-year-old Leroy Doctor, who is a member of the Nation of Islam, entered Pacific Gas and Electric and aimed a gun at 27-year-old Robert Stockman. So they struggled with a gun and a bullet did graze Stockman's neck before he was able to shoot Doctor. Doctor was arrested just hours later and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. He had been out on parole at the time of the assault. He was convicted and sent to prison for this assault. So a lot of these people are just not really getting away with it.
Yeah.
So Harris had recently split from his wife, Carolyn, on November 25th when he called Black Self-Help and asked if Larry Green was working. He wasn't, but JC Simon was working and asked Harris if he wanted to go out later. So Harris agreed and Simon picked him up in his work van. So Edward Land, another member of the Nation of Islam, rode along and they went to Arikat's grocery and waited outside. We hope that is the correct pronunciation of Arikat. I'm sure somebody will email us and let us know if it is wrong, and we will correct it in the ever-going corrections that we have to do.
it's names are really hard, guys, because like we can look it up and different places may pronounce it differently. So it's like we may find a pronunciation that someone uses and then other places don't. So we do try our best. I'm sorry.
Yeah. We were actually talking about this like right before we started recording about like names, how it's like, even if you go to different parts of the US, like people may pronounce it like Megan, you know, stuff like that. So it's like, we're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but we try. Yeah. No, in our little hearts, we try. So Simon asked to borrow Harris's gun and said that he had loaned his gun to someone else. So Harris did agree. Simon had been buying apples at the grocery store and knew the owner, 53-year-old Salim Arikat. So Arikat had owned the store for 13 years, and he and his wife Samia had 4 children ranging in age from a young teenager to a 21-year-old. So the whole family worked in the grocery store, and they really took pride in their family business. The Arikats were well liked and well respected in the community, and Simon said no one went into the grocery store during the first hour of Sunday morning, so he waited until Arikat opened the store and then went inside. So Simon had Harris wait at the front door as a lookout while he went in and held the gun on Salim Arikat. So Arikat showed him where the money was, thinking like, I'm just being robbed. Like, here, just take the money. It's not worth it. Like, just take it. Simon told him he needed to tie him up first so that he wouldn't follow him or call the police after he left. So Harris tied up Arikat with his own necktie and shot him before stealing the cash register money, his wallet, and watch. Again, we're breaking the rules. You're not supposed to steal. Like, what are you doing, guys?
Yep.
Simon then took a baby Ruth off the shelf and ate it while he and Harris left. So gross.
Which I feel like just really demonstrates like just the complete disassociation from the fact that you're murdering human beings. Like we talked about with like the Manson murders, like they murdered them, then they're like having a snack in the kitchen. And it's like, what? Like
how can you eat after that? Like, in the same like building as like, ugh, I don't get it. I guess that's why I'm not a murderer, but. So it is unclear what Edward Land's role was in this murder. So after the men had left, a customer entered the store and then noticed that like no one was around, even though the store was open. So they went next door to Harrington's Irish Club and found someone to go into the grocery store with them. And they did find Salim Erekat body inside. So he was a very popular man and the community was devastated. And witnesses described seeing a black man hanging outside the grocery store just before the body was found. So Harris got on a bus after leaving the scene and took Erekat's wallet and watch with him. And he noticed that the driver was very observant. So he thought he would remember where people were sitting on the bus and decided to like plant the wallet and try to like plant this on someone else. So when two black men got off the bus, he put the wallet in the seat they were sitting in when the bus driver wasn't looking. So the bus driver later found the wallet and contacted his supervisor. Harris had planned on keeping the watch, but he ran out of money and decided to pawn it, and he only got $10 for it.
And they also mentioned in the book too, like what a dumb decision it was on his part to be like, oh, like I'm going to plant this on someone else. So like, this is who they're going to be thinking of. And he planted it on two other black men. And it's like, why didn't you plan on someone that didn't look like you? Because now you're just like reinforcing their idea that it's a group of black men that are doing this.
And if you're like a black nationalist group, why wouldn't you want to like plant it on white people?
Right? Makes
like,
no sense.
Yeah, they're not thinking this through.
Which I think just kind of shows that a lot of the members of this group, like, yeah, they believed in this message, but like this was also just an avenue for them to murder people. Mm-hmm. It's not like they were like really, you know, like I'm sure some of like the higher up people were, but like I don't think it was just an excuse for them, you know.
Mm-hmm. So detectives working Erekat's case were unsure if the motive was like a hired killing or if it was like a robbery, like gone wrong kind of thing. And so since Erekat was tied up and shot execution style, they wondered if the robbery was done after the hit or if they intended to rob him and suddenly felt the need to murder him as well. And on December 11th, Manuel Moore shot 26-year-old Paul Roman Danek 3 times on Height Street. So Danek was walking towards a payphone when he was approached by Moore, Harris, and Simon. And Moore had borrowed Harris's gun and was looking for his first kill for the Death Angel since being released from prison. So Harris robbed Danek. Again, you're not supposed to do that. You're just supposed to, what are you guys doing? Notice he had a lot of cash.
Dumb.
Can't even watch a South Park thing I'm talking about. But so Simon quickly drove the group away from the scene, but there were several witnesses who described the black man who shot Danek. Ballistics came back and revealed that the same gun was used to kill Erekat and Danek.
On December 20th, 81-year-old Ilario Bertuccio, sorry.
You suck. I'm so sorry.
So Ilario closed up at the 7-Up bottling plant where he worked and started to walk home. So he was a really healthy man who enjoyed working, and he enjoyed his half-mile walk to and from work every day. His friends and family encouraged him to retire, but he got satisfaction out of his work, and he planned to work until the day he died. He's like, I'm never going to retire. Like, I'm just going to keep doing this. I enjoy it. So while walking home that night, he was approached and repeatedly shot in the back by Moore. And later that night, 20-year-old Teresa DeMartini was shot 3 times by Simon, but she did survive. So Harris got his pistol back from Simon and hid it in the air vent of the bathroom at Black Self-Help, where they had the Nation of Islam meetings. So according to Harris, he was uncomfortable with these killings and he didn't want his own gun associated with it anymore. So Green saw Harris putting his gun back in his hiding spot and decided to borrow it to go out and look for more people to add to his count towards getting his death wings. His death angel wings. Yeah, right?
He's like, I'm going to keep using that gun.
Yeah. He's like, I'm going to take that thing. You don't want it associated with you? Oh, well, I'm just going to use it anyway. So on December 22nd, 19-year-old Neil Moynihan was walking down the street carrying a teddy bear, which was a present for his 10-year-old sister. So Green approached Neil and shot him several times. And as Green was running away, he saw 50-year-old Mildred Hostler walking to the bus stop, and he shot her 4 times in the back. Neil died on the scene, and Mildred was pronounced dead at the hospital. Arthur Agnos was a 35-year-old Greek American who worked as a consultant to the California State Legislature's Joint Commission on Aging. And on December 23rd, he left home to go to a meeting for residents of a public housing development about a new health clinic in their area. So it was a really positive meeting, and Art was even asked to run for a position on the board of directors. He was a well-liked man who just wanted to help people. And outside the meeting, Art stopped to talk to two women, and Simon walked up to Art and shot him twice in the back. Art turned and looked at him, and Simon was afraid because Art was not dead, so he turned and ran. So the women helped Art to a nearby house where he collapsed. He was taken into surgery to remove his spleen and to repair a punctured kidney and lung. Art Agnos survived and would go on to become the mayor of San Francisco in 1988.
What a recovery story.
Right? Like, wow.
He's like, it's okay.
Yep.
I'm going to keep going.
I still love this city. I'm still going to go forward. So later that night, 31-year-old Marietta DiGirolamo was at home getting ready to go out for a drink. And Manuel Moore and JC Simon were once again driving around, specifically looking for people to kill. Like, these are not like, I mean, it is a quote, wrong place, wrong time kind of thing, but like they're actively seeking out people to murder for the sake of murdering them.
Which I think is terrifying when we think about like, that's when we listen to true crime a lot. And like, this is literally the thing when these people were like, I'm just going to go shoot anyone who is white. And we've seen this like with like white supremacists also who are like, I'm just going to kill anyone who is black. Like it happened. Like, it's not saying, white people are oppressed or anything, but like, it is terrifying. Like thinking about it, like you're walking down the street and the whole reason you get murdered is not because like you cut someone off in traffic, you didn't get in a fight, like you were just standing there. Yeah. You're just walking home from work. You're just whatever.
Yeah. And especially because like, this is very unusual. I mean, if you look at the number of people that are murdered, like these types of cases don't happen very often. Like it's usually someone you know very closely. This isn't the like typical, like this is what you hear in all like the big true crime books and things like that, but it's not usually how it happens, but it does happen, which makes it super scary. So Moore and Simon were convinced that Art would die. So it was now Moore's turn to murder someone else so he could be one victim closer. So Moore saw Marietta walking down the street and he got out of the car that Simon was driving and started following her. He then shoved her in the doorway of a barber shop and shot her twice before running away. So several witnesses saw the murder and an ambulance was called, but Marietta was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Police went to her apartment from the address on her ID and questioned her neighbors. And her neighbors described her boyfriend, who also matched the description the witnesses had given police of a young black man. So this time police are like, oh, like we got lucky. Like the killer was someone that she knew. Like she's not part of this like other thing we have going on. But after questioning the boyfriend, they decided that he was not the one who killed Marietta. So a group of black men in the Potrero Hill district where Art was shot decided that they wanted to guard the white men in their neighborhood because it was now getting clear that someone was randomly shooting white people in San Francisco. So they did surround Art during the next meeting he attended so that he would arrive safely. So when Harris later took his gun out of its hiding spot, he knew that it had been fired and he suspected that Green was the one that took it to commit the murders that occurred earlier that week. In the book, they said that he was just very like happy and like joyful. And like you could tell from his mood that Harris was like, I think you did these. And I think you used my gun because I can tell it was fired recently. Yeah. So Harris did throw his gun off the Golden State Bridge that night. So ballistics once again came back and said that the same gun that killed Erakat and Dankik was also used to shoot Art and kill Marietta. So police now knew for sure that they had a serial killer on their hands. And they were also starting to receive similar witness descriptions of young black men. So someone who witnessed Marietta's shooting said she believed the killer was a black Muslim that worked at Black Self-Help. So police put the moving company under surveillance, but the witness was never able to positively identify the man. So they did end the surveillance because they didn't have anything else to justify it. Like she's like, I think he works there. But then once, she's asked to like, okay, who is the exact person here? She couldn't decide who it was. So like, well, we can't do anything else with this. A woman who asked for her name to be changed had arrived home from a party and was walking back to her house from parking her car when she was approached by Simon, who shot her 3 times. She started screaming so loudly that he got scared and ran off. And the woman did survive her injuries, but a bullet nicked her spine, and it would be months before she learned how to walk again. And so terrifying that, like, at the time the book was written, which was just a few years, after this, she was like, no, do not use my name because, like, they may still be after me. Mm-hmm. On December 24th, the group kidnapped an unidentified white male on North Point Street and brought him back to Black Self-Help, where they tortured him and stabbed him with small blades until he died.
Just so cruel.
horrific. It gets even worse. Harris dumped the man's body in the San Francisco Bay, and he was found 10 hours later with no hands, head, or feet.
Oof.
So when we talk about the level of torture that occurred, yeah. Police labeled him John Doe number 169, and he to this day has never been identified. So an attorney with an Arab organization offered reward money for information leading to the arrest of Erekat's murder, because he was really popular, like we said, in the Arabic community. So they're like trying to help him specifically. They also suggested paying the legal defense for an involved informant that came forward, because at this point, they don't believe that they're going to catch these killers without someone who was involved going to the police. So they're like, what if we came together and offered to pay for legal defense for someone who comes forward and reveals what all, because clearly there are multiple people involved here.
Mm-hmm.
So since Harris tossed his gun and they could no longer use it, Simon and Moore went out and bought another one from a man on the streets. So on January 28th, 1974, Muhammad Ali fought Joe Frazier II in a widely publicized fight at Madison Square Garden. So Ali's victory was a victory for Muslims everywhere, and they all wanted to celebrate. So Simon, Moore, and Harris, who again claimed to be Muslims, but the Muslims do not claim them, but they wanted to use this night as an opportunity to hunt down white people as part of their celebration. So this would be the most deadly night in a single night out of all these killings.
Mm-hmm.
So 32-year-old Tana Smith worked as a secretary at the Scientific Development Division of the Bechtel Corporation. So she hoped to visit her parents in Florida soon and to work at the Opera House. And the night of January 28th, she was walking to the fabric store to buy fabric to make a new blouse. So Simon got out of the car with the other two men and shot Tana in the back. A man in another car witnessed the shooting and ran to a nearby hospital to get help for Tana. So the three men got back in their car and kept driving, and Tana died at the hospital during surgery. Vincent Wallen was retired from the Coast Guard and had retired from his second career as a cabinet maker as well. And he enjoyed playing dominoes and pool at the local rec room, having coffee and donuts in town, and just walking around San Francisco. Like, he is just fully living his retirement, just loving life, doing his thing. January 28th was actually his 69th birthday, and he was walking down the street when Moore shot him in the back. There were several witnesses that described the black man that had killed Vincent, and Vincent did die at the hospital that night. 84-year-old John Bambick was a loner and spent his time searching for valuable items in the trash bins, and Harris shot him in the back as he rummaged through a dumpster. Bambick actually turned and tried to fight back, but he did end up dying on the scene. 45-year-old Jane Holly was at the laundromat that evening waiting on her clothes to finish. So she was from St. Louis and was one of 14 children. She had been married to her husband for 25 years, and they had one son named Stephen, who was in the Army, and she had been working at Wells Fargo for the past 15 years. So the group approached the laundromat, and Moore noticed that there was only one white woman in this predominantly black laundromat. So he entered and shot her twice in front of at least 8 witnesses, which is like crazy that you're just so brazen to be like, well, I'm just going to go in here and just shoot you in front of all of these people.
I guess they're getting away with so many murders too. They're like,
why not?
Here we go.
Yeah. So Holly did die at the hospital that night. 23-year-old Roxanne McMillan was from South Dakota and was one of 11 children. She was married to Alan John McMillan, and they had a 4-month-old baby named Leon. So the family was in the process of moving into their new apartment when Simon saw Roxanne outside alone carrying boxes and shot her twice. Roxanne survived, but she would be permanently paralyzed. So all of these attacks so far had happened at night and did seem to be random. And one of the largest manhunts in the city was initiated, but police were at a loss since the attacks occurred at all parts of the city and there was like no kind of pattern. Like, they're like, we can't have someone on every single street in San Francisco. Like, they're everywhere. There's no pattern. There's, nothing to go off of other than they're white and it's usually at night.
Mm-hmm.
So a task force was created and led by detectives Gus Correris and John Fotinos. So these detectives had investigated the murder of Salim Erekat and had found that the same gun had been used in multiple shootings. So Detective Dave Tashi, who was famous for his work on the Zodiac case, was a part of the task force as well. Police Chief Donald Scott assigned the Z police radio frequency exclusively for the use of this task force, so they started calling it Operation Zebra, hence where the name The Zebra Killings came from. And since all of the victims were white and all of the survivors and witnesses had described Black men as their attackers, the name Zebra did stick because of the racial implications associated with these murders. Many survivors and witnesses also described a 69 Black Cadillac. So detectives asked the DMV for copies of licenses of every Black man with that car in the state. It's going to get worse. Don't worry. So ballistics came back showing that all 5 shootings from January 28th had been from the same gun, but that gun didn't match the one that had been used to all the previous murders. So they're like, okay, we got a different gun now, but it's still the exact same MO, you know? So Detective Tashi went to a police meeting about similar statewide murders, and some believed that a Black extremist group was responsible for these killings, but there was no hard evidence of this. And detectives knew that groups like this really strictly screened their members, so it would be really hard to infiltrate with informants. But from descriptions of well-dressed Black men, police also began began suspecting the Black Muslims as well. So on February 17th, 1974, the state put the Nation of Islam mosque, known as Muhammad Temple number 26, under surveillance. So more than 400 Black men were photographed entering the mosque, and they did start showing these photos to witnesses. After murdering John Bambick, Anthony Harris separated from the group and moved to Oakland. So his new girlfriend was pregnant, and they were going to raise the baby together.
Also around this time, an anonymous letter was written to the police by someone claiming to have previously been a part of the Black Muslims. So they described their belief system and hatred of white people and said they were responsible for the zebra killings, but they didn't list any specific names. Just like, yeah, we're responsible, but we're not going to tell you who. So soon after, a detective on the case drove by the mosque and saw a man named Willie Fields walking out of the mosque. So the detective had previously put this man away for robbery and rape and decided to start following him. So Fields caught on and started to run, and in the process, he dropped some papers he was carrying. So the papers discussed murdering the white man in order to gain wings. So police were getting closer and closer to the killers, but they still didn't really have any like hard evidence. They're like, we think we know what's happening, but we don't really know who.
And it's like also, I mean, 400 people were photographed going in and out. So it's like, you can't arrest 400 people because you think one of them might be this group of between 2 and 5 murderers, you know?
Yeah. And on April 1st, 1974, the group of Black Muslims wanted to resume killing after 9 weeks of trying to stay under the radar because of police patrols. So 19-year-old Thomas Rainwater and 21-year-old Linda Story were both cadets at the Salvation Army Officer Training School. So Rainwater had attended Bethany Bible College in Santa Cruz, and his family operated a rest home for the elderly and ill, and his plans after school was to work with orphans. And Linda was one of 5 kids, and she was described as very likable and attended Peralta Community College. I hope I said that right. I probably didn't. But Thomas and Linda attended an evening study class together from 7 to 9 p.m. that night. And the school did have a curfew of 10:30, so they decided to walk down to the Mayfair Market for a snack after their class. And Green approached them and held a gun on them. So they turned and ran, and he shot both of them in the back. Linda did fall into a gutter and started to scream, and Thomas staggered down the block before collapsing. Vice detectives who were working on an unrelated sting nearby approached, but they were not able to find the perpetrator. A witness did see Green running through some trees, and he did trip and caught himself on a car and kept going. So the witness made note of which car he touched, and it was later tested, but no prints were found.
But Thomas, good for that witness for being like, oh, I saw which car he touched. I'm going to make sure and tell police to check that out. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's very observant and like very good that he was like, yeah, I'm going to pay attention to that. So Thomas did die on the scene, but Linda survived and Green still got away. On Easter Sunday, Moore approached 2 white men waiting at a bus stop. Terry White was a teenager who had spent the day having a picnic at Golden Gate Park with his family. And he left the picnic to go visit with some friends and was taking the bus back home when Moore approached him. And Ward Anderson was waiting at the bus stop to go visit a friend. Moore shot both Terry and Ward, and both survived. So Nick Shields and Jonathan May were riding in a station wagon going to pick up some carpet after playing lacrosse, which I feel like is oddly specific.
Just a everyday Saturday activity.
Play some lacrosse, pick up some carpet, So 23-year-old Jonathan was a cancer researcher at the University of California Medical Center. Shields was from Greenville, Delaware, and went to Hobart College in New York. And Shields had just moved to the Bay Area 2 weeks before and was living with friends. So they stopped to get the carpet, and May went inside with while Shields cleaned out the back of the station wagon to make room for the carpet. So Simon was walking down the street when he saw the white man alone and leaning into the back of a car. He approached him and shot him 3 times. Shields died instantly, and Simon started hopping fences and backyards to get away from the scene. And it was the middle of the afternoon, which is not really usually when the killers attacked. Like, it was usually at night. But Simon had taken the opportunity, and he was now afraid of getting caught. He did toss the gun into some bushes, which I just feel like that's dumb. Like, why are you putting it in bushes where it'll be found?
That makes no sense.
But again, none of this does. So,
and we're not killers, so we can't put our minds into the minds of a killer.
Yeah. So the San Francisco Police Department started stopping young Black men that fit the description of the killers, which obviously increased racial tensions in the city. So they started hanging out zebra check cards so that once a Black man was stopped and cleared, they could hand that card over to the next policeman who stopped them, and they would be let go. So protests did start, and the ACLU and NAACP filed lawsuits for violating constitutional guarantees of personal freedom. And U.S. District Judge Alfonso J. Zerpoli ruled that the stop and searches were unconstitutional, and they had to have like other information in order to just like search random Black men on the street. Like, you can't just stop them all.
And this is a spot where the book made me so mad, because the author was like, oh, and the Black population was trying to make it as hard as possible for the police and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you can't stop and search every Black man in the city because these killers are Black. Like, and they're like, oh, we did the same thing with Zodiac. No, you didn't. You didn't stop every white person in the streets of San Francisco. Like, that would be impossible. You didn't do that. Like, yeah, that's not okay.
And if you know from like a stop and search, like, it's probably not gentle and it's probably not nice. And this is the 70s. So it's like the heyday of just like police corruption too.
Right. And how many other Black men were arrested for like marijuana possession or like these other ridiculous
resisting arrest, quote unquote.
Right. Exactly. That they never would have even been stopped if it wasn't for this mission procedure to whatever, and they also talked about how like the zebra check cards were very like Nazi, like, oh, like, okay, like you passed, here's this, and here's your, identification. Just bizarre.
So the reward was collected by the Arab community, the Examiner newspaper, the city of San Francisco, and private anonymous citizens. So detectives had composite sketches drawn from witness descriptions and released them in the newspaper along with the information about the $30,000 reward. So Anthony Harris recognized himself in one of the sketches, and he knew it wouldn't be long before he was caught. Like, that's pretty bad if you're like, that's me. That's a picture of me right there.
Yeah. And it said in the book too that he like saw it in the newspaper, and then he was just like, ugh. And like he got like really quiet and was all like, acting weird. And his girlfriend's like, what's going on? What's going on? And he just like set it down, and she's just like, oh shit. Like, she immediately recognized him too.
Yeah. So he did decide to come forward so that he could at least have a chance at the reward money. So he contacted the Zebra tip line number, and they arranged for 2 detectives to meet him in a bank parking lot. He asked for the money for his girlfriend and son, his name to not be in the paper, and full immunity in exchange for his information. So during their conversation, Harris mentioned the hog attack and the 3 kids that they tried to kidnap earlier that night. So the investigators now knew he had actual information because only the police knew about the attempted kidnapping, and they had not yet made the connection between the Kita Hogs murder and the other zebra murders. So they agreed to Harris's demands, and he started talking. He just opened up that can of worms.
Here you go.
Here's all the names. Here's all the locations, and even confessed to disposing of the unknown man's body. So detectives are encouraging Harris to get a lawyer. He didn't know one, so he called one at random from the Yellow Pages. So police arranged to have Harris and his family hidden in a hotel, but Harris's girlfriend spoke to someone at the mosque and told them where they were. So Harris's girlfriend's just letting it out. Like, girl, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Which I do want to add too, that like this mosque was like a Muslim mosque that had people not associated with this extremist group. Like it wasn't the mosque itself that was preaching this. It was like a small portion of them. So like, they did have this like community that they were a part of. And like, I guess she didn't make the connection of like, oh, I shouldn't, like, she didn't realize there were people part of this group, you know?
So a group of Black Muslims showed up looking for them, but police saw them first and moved Harris and his family again. And the group went to every hotel in the city that night trying to find Harris and his family. So at this point, Harris had only confessed to disposing of a body and having knowledge of the murders. And the detectives told Harris he had to implicate himself so they could use his statement to the grand jury, because otherwise it's just hearsay. They're like, you're just saying I heard this from someone else. That's not, you're going to have to implicate yourself.
Yeah.
Harris knew he was out of options because the other Black Muslims knew he was in police custody and he wouldn't be safe even if he refused to talk. He's like, if I'm let out of here, I'm done. So
yeah, exactly. He's like, I don't have any options here.
So Harris wanted a guarantee of immunity from the mayor himself before he would give a full confession. So the mayor was out of town and had to fly back in the middle of the night to speak with Harris personally. The mayor told Harris, like, I don't have the authority to grant you immunity. That's not in my job description. But I will personally go to bat for you and do everything like I can to make sure you're not prosecuted. But it's like, I'm the mayor. I'm not the police,
right?
Or the DA. Like,
I don't do that.
I just had to fly home. Thank you.
Which is crazy. But I mean, obviously it's a huge thing that so many people are being murdered. And like, we finally have someone who's willing to talk about who is doing this. And they're like, oh, he wants to talk to the mayor. Well, fly the mayor here in the middle of the night. Like, we will make it happen.
Whatever
we have to do something. Yeah.
So this was good enough for Harris. And he provided details for all of the murders that he'd been a part of. And on May 1st, 1974, Jesse Lee Cooks was already in prison for the murder of Francis Rose, but police prepared to arrest 7 other men based on Anthony Harris's statement. So Simon and Green lived in the same apartment complex, and 2 other individuals were believed to be at Black Self-Help. So police set up around the city to arrest all 7 at exactly 5 a.m. So Manuel Moore, Larry Green, J.C. Simon, Thomas Maney, Dwight Stallings, Edgar Burton, and Clarence Jamerson were all arrested. So Maney, Stallings, Burton, and Jamerson were later released because of lack of evidence. So 2 young boys were playing baseball when they found a gun tossed in some bushes. Like I said, bad idea.
Courtney warned you. Courtney said that was going to happen, guys. You didn't listen.
So it was near the Shields murder and was the same type that had been used for all of the murders. So police started gathering forensics. There were no fingerprints, but the bullets matched the last set of murders. And they could tie the gun to the murders, but couldn't yet tie it to the man they had arrested, or any of the men they had arrested. So they reached out to ATF and asked them to trace the weapon. And they found the gun had been sold to Peter David Pupo, who had previously been an Air Force medic. That guy's last name. Yeah, I didn't know how
I'm 5 years old.
It. I was like, there's only one way I can think to say this. So he'd sold the gun to his roommate, Brad Bishop, after getting out of the military. Bishop was finally tracked down by acquaintances, and police interviewed him in Hawaii. So Bishop originally claimed to not know what happened to the gun. So police threatened to charge him with murder since he was the last person tied to the gun. And he's like, okay. So basically then he's like, all right, I did sell the gun to a street dealer for $20. So when they tracked down the dealer, he said the gun was stolen from his apartment, and he found the guy who stole it from him, and he had already sold the gun. So this gun is just hopping everywhere here.
The book dedicated an entire chapter to the evolution of this gun. I tried to condense it as small as possible, like more details than you could ever need to know about the transfer of this gun.
So when police spoke to the guy who stole it, he wouldn't give any more information about what happened to the gun after that. And it would be many months before they found a witness who admitted to buying the gun from that individual and selling it to Thomas Manny, the Black Muslim and owner of Black Self-Help. So finally, after months, they
finally ties to him
after this wild goose chase. So 31 witnesses confirmed Harris's claims, and on May 16th, Larry Green, Manuel Moore, and J.C. Simon were indicted on 1 count conspiracy to commit murder, 3 counts murder, 2 counts kidnapping, 2 counts robbery, and 4 counts assault with a deadly weapon. The prisoners were ordered to be kept separate from one another. So the trial started on March 3rd, 1975, and lasted until March 9th, 1976. 181 witnesses testified during the trial. 181.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot for that jury. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Harris was obviously the star witness and admitted to participation in 10 of the crimes. His ex-wife, Carolyn, testified about Harris giving her the ring engraved by the Hoggs, and a pawn shop owner was also testified about Harris selling him Salim Ereckat's watch. So the jury found all defendants guilty on all counts in 18 hours. So they were just like, after this like year-long trial, they're like, yeah, we know what happened. So this included an additional sentence for Jesse Lee Cooks for his role in the Hogg murder. So it's believed that more than 100 of these murders took place statewide in California as part of the Death Angels initiation, and that many were just never solved. Because it's like, clearly this probably wasn't just happening solely in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So in 1975, the leader of the Black Muslims sect of the Old Nation of Islam died and was replaced by his son. He relinquished his leadership for a governing council and worked to reform the religion's image. They are now called the World Community of Islam, and they no longer preach the superiority of the Black race, and they welcome members of all races and ethnicities. So they're like, we need to just wipe ourselves clean of that whole ordeal. So J.C. Simon died at San Quentin Prison in 2015 at the age of 69. Manuel Moore died at the California Healthcare Facility in Stockton in 2017 at the age of 73. Jesse Lee Cooks died in the hospice unit of the California Medical Facility in Vacaville in 2021, so just last year. And as of 2021, Larry Green was still serving his sentence at California State Prison, Solano, and Vacaville. We can't really find any more information on where Anthony Harris is today. He's probably in witness protection. That is the murder of Keita Hogg, Francis Rose, Salim Ereckat, Paul Danick, Marietta Di Girolamo, so sorry, Ilario Bertuccio, Neil Moynihan, Mildred Hosler, the unidentified John Doe victim, Tana Smith, Vincent Wallen, John Bambick, Jane Hawley, Thomas Rainwater, and Nelson Shields. And we also want to mention all those who were wounded in the, attacked but did not die. That was Richard Hogg, Robert Stockman, Art Agnos, the woman whose name wished to be changed, Thomas Bates, Roxanne McMillan, Linda Story, Ward Anderson, and Terry White, as well as the 3 kids who were kidnapped from the beginning. And also Linda Lou Inger. So, and also, as we said, they believe there could have been hundreds of these murders. So all the victims that we don't even know their names. And also just these people's families, Richard now has to live without his wife. And, it's a lot. So
much collateral damage. And I do want to add too, that obviously a lot of this information that came out in trial was based on Harris's testimony. So it is very, very possible that he was actively involved in more than he said he was, because he did admit to the John Bambick murder. But again, all of this was based on what he said. So I'm sure he probably did more than he said he did, because he's trying to downplay his own involvement. There are also some theories that none of these guys other than Harris had anything to do with it, and that he just implicated these random people. I don't know. I can't find enough about the trial, but you have 181 other witnesses that testify. I feel like there has to be something to this. It wasn't
I would
just...
really hope so.
Yeah. wasn't just solely on the word of Anthony Harris. We also teased about this a few weeks ago, I think, but talking about why some like serial killers are covered in the Gainesville Ripper case. But we talked about why some serial killers are widely covered and others are not. And actually at the time that I was researching this, I listened to the Red Handed episode about the DC sniper, which was the same group of people, like not specific men, but the same Nation of Islam Black nationalist group. So they were talking about some theories that they looked into on why, Black serial killers are not really covered. Because if you look at the statistics, it's not a huge disparity when you look at the number, like the percentage of the races in the country. If you look at the percentage of serial killers, it's not like a big disparity. But they came up with two big reasons that they thought would, tie into why that is the case. The first one being that the media doesn't want to negatively portray Black people because they are already so negatively portrayed. But at the same time, they are already so negatively portrayed. So why would you pick this one instance to not showcase? You know what I mean? And I did feel uncomfortable at some points in this episode because I feel like these victim stories deserve to be told, but I feel like this is the reason this case isn't covered a lot in true crime media now, because people don't want to put that image out there of trying to taint the image of Black people that so many people already have, you know what I mean? So I can see that for now, but as far as leading up to this point in the mainstream media, I'm I don't think that's quite the case. But their other one is that as a society, we like to glorify serial killers. And so we like to glorify the serial killers that we think are attractive, like Ted Bundy, and that are have this double life like BTK and things like that. And so, they don't think that. In the Red Handed podcast, they talked about how this group isn't covered as much because you're oh, that's not the kind of serial killer that I like. I don't want to look at it. And we fully recognize how ridiculous this whole thing sounds. I just want to point that out there, that this obviously does not represent our views. And we try very hard to be a victim-centered podcast and to not glorify the murderers, but a lot of true crime content does. So I can definitely see that being a reason why that you're oh, I don't identify with these murderers. I'm not attracted to these murderers. I'm not, excited about these murderers or whatever. But it is a very interesting phenomenon that these murders are never covered, and especially occurring in San Francisco at the same time as the Zodiac. And look at the Zodiac today and look at the zebra killings today that most people have never heard of. It's a very strange parallel.
Yeah, definitely. And that's just why we're also mentioning very small sect. This does not represent all Black people,
absolutely,
all Muslims, none of that. This is just your supremacist group. You have a lot of white supremacists, so don't get all on your high horse about anything.
Yes.
But yeah, it is a story that's not widely talked about, and a lot of victims, so it just deserves to be talked about.
And definitely listen to that Red Handed episode, because the way that I summed it up, they explained it much better. So definitely, check out their episode and their thoughts on that. And one of their hosts is Black, so I feel more comfortable pushing you to listen to her thoughts on it as well. So yeah, all of that being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is last night I got to go to Knoxville's annual Brew Fest. So it's always, I went to my first one last year and then got to go again this year. So it's always super fun. They have 60 breweries come out, and you just get a little cup and you just go to as many as you want. And it gets hard towards the end because your stomach gets full real quick, but you just push on through. The standout from this year is one place did have a frozen ice cream liquor drink. It was a soft serve, a liquor soft serve. It was so good.
Wow,
it was
yum.
It almost tastes like an orange, creamsicle kind of thing, but it was so good because it has been hot. Thankfully, it cooled off, and the temperature was actually really nice, and there was a nice breeze, and we were kind of in the shade, so we didn't, die of heat exhaustion. But it was super fun. It's always fun to go to, and they have music and food trucks, and it's always just a good time. So I really enjoy going. So that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that yesterday we just had one of those days where it's like nothing major happens. It's just one of those ordinary days, but it's just such a good day. Like at the end of the day, you're just like, I just had a great day with my family. Like we got up and went to the farmer's market. And then we went out to lunch where we had to order my baby her own meal because she eats too much to share mine now. So she they had little kid bento boxes. So it was like turkey and cheese and fruit and crackers.
Aww,
and
that's cute.
It was adorable. So she got to have her own meal and just eat like such a big girl. And then we came back and she played in her water table. The dogs played in their pool and we just hung out outside for a while. And then when we put her down to bed, Andrew made me a blackberry margarita and then he grilled us some hamburgers. So then we got to eat outside, just the two of us, and just one of those days where it's like the end of our lives. These are the days we remember, like you remember the big moments, but like you also remember just like all the little moments that were just enjoyable, so that's my perk of the week.
Yeah, that's a good one. Those days are the best when it's like just kind of chill, just kind of have a good day,
Yeah. So if you want to tell us about your fun days, your brew fests, your thoughts on why some serial killers are covered and others are not, if you want to correct us on people that we thought were alive that died 40 years ago, if you want to correct us on many, many name pronunciations, all those things, you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. That's not usually what I start with. I don't know why I'm going out of order. You can find us on Instagram at caffeinatedcrimespod. We are on Twitter at caffcrimespod. That's CAFF crimespod. We are on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast. We are on YouTube and TikTok. Apparently, we don't respond to YouTube comments, though, so maybe not the best place to reach
I'll try
us.
to be better. The hate comments have calmed down, so I will try to be better about replying and acknowledging people's comments, because for a while there, it was like kind of like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah, you got to be in a good headspace to look at YouTube comments because they're rough. So if you want us to respond to those, maybe leave us some positive YouTube comments, so we'll be more likely to go through and check that out.
And also, if you want to get that bonus I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, I know it feels like years ago, but there is a bonus coming out this Thursday. And if you want to be a part of our Google Hangout, again, remember all tiers get that this month, not just this month, this summer. I don't know. Words, guys, are kind of difficult sometimes. But you can be a part of our Discord. Just a bunch of perks over there. So if you go over there, you'll see everything outlined. It'll explain what's in every tier, ad-free episodes, shout outs, a bunch of different perks. You can do so at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes. And if you would be so kind to please just leave us a 5-star on Apple or Spotify, helps us get noticed, helps us, improve the pod. That would be great. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.